A few years back, I reviewed all of the main series Dynasty Warriors games from the PS2, and came away with 5 being my favorite of the bunch. And the reason is pretty subtle. In entries prior to 5, your sword swing making contact with a foe caused your direction to become fixed for further attacks in the same combo, effectively locking you into a particular direction until you finished the combo's execution. Dynasty Warriors 5 removed this function altogether, permitting you to swing freely, allowing mid-combo direction changes to help account for both a larger and omnidirectional enemy presence. It wasn't exactly an advertisable back-of-the-box feature, but it did make a tremendous difference in how playing the game felt, and there's a reason that no Warriors sequel nor spin-off has ever gone back to the old way of doing things. And this spin-off, One Piece Pirate Warriors 4, is filled with little changes like that. Changes that make really minor tweaks to how the combat feels. And if you know anything about the Warriors series, you'll know that it's so entirely predicated on its combat that even the smallest fighting adjustment can have massive ripple effects. If you don't know anything about the Warriors series, here's a quick rundown on both the relevant franchises we'll be discussing and my history with them so that you can understand where I'm coming from. Dynasty Warriors is a long-running action series that plays like a 3D beat-em-up, putting your heroic character onto a map filled with hundreds, if not thousands, of enemies. The focus isn't on learning long combos, but instead on allowing you to mash and rack up high body counts within minutes of picking up the controller. The main series of games is a romanticization of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which itself is a romanticization of the late Han Dynasty China. But the combat follows a simple enough template that the developers often port their iconic Warriors gameplay to other timelines and franchises. Franchises like One Piece. One Piece is a Japanese manga series published within Shonen Jump, a weekly manga anthology targeted at teenage boys that more or less has become synonymous with the fighty, punchy, power-uppy style of manga that One Piece itself very much is. At its core, it's a story about friendship, dreams, treasure, and adventure, but much like a lot of the other series that ink Shonen Jump's panels, those themes get expressed by punching bad guys of escalating toughness. Which isn't a dig, mind you, I think One Piece absolutely nails that formula. So I have a history with both franchises. I'm a casual fan of the former, and a militant devotee of the latter. And if you're worried that my fanaticism towards One Piece will cause me to go easy on its games, then, well, honestly I think I have the opposite problem. I've played a bunch of One Piece games, and I've yet to play a truly excellent one, and my past few weeks with Pirate Warriors 4 haven't changed that. But don't let my high expectations for One Piece games get you down, because Pirate Warriors 4 is the best in the series, and the series was already my go-to recommendation for One Piece games anyway. I've narrowed down what I think Pirate Warriors 4's most meaningful changes are, and it's no coincidence that all of these changes are combat-centric. The Pirate Warriors series traditionally forgoes a jump button in lieu of a short-range dash. The manual and tutorial prompts may label this as an evade button, but don't listen to them, they're lying. This is actually your infinite combo extender button. The evade has the critical function of being able to stop any mid-combo animation short, but it doesn't stop your enemies from being juggled by that combo, allowing you to start up a brand new combo on the same opponents. It feels great, and I argue that it's the core feature that gives this series its unique feel compared to the other Warriors games. This small feature multiplies both the speed and amount of carnage you can dish out. It's received some tweaks in 4 that enhance its utility as an actual evade button, but thankfully it's done in a way that doesn't compromise what made it such a fun button in the first place. Its infinite spammability is now gated by a stamina meter, but that's there to help balance some of its new tricks. The default range of the dash is mostly the same, but now that dash can be held to have you traverse 3 to 4 times as much distance as previously, allowing you to zip around the battlefield quickly both in and out of combat. The extra range means you can more feasibly use the dash to create distance from foes if you want to, but another subtle tweak is that dashing towards your foe now registers as a hit. This means that even the longest range dash in the direction you're comboing in won't send you flying behind your enemies, but instead carry their limp bodies with you so you can continue your pummeling even farther away. I eventually got to the point where I was able to keep these juggles up for so long that I'd have a snowball of carcasses and live foes alike being brought along for this horribly unpleasant horizontal trip through enemy corridors, racking up multi-thousand hit combos without even paying it much mind. And what would an increased emphasis on horizontal mobility be without its thinner older brother? I mentioned that the Pirate Warriors series traditionally replaced its jump button with the aforementioned dash, but Pirate Warriors 4 is the first game to ask a very deep and philosophical question. Why not have both? You can now jump, which in a vacuum honestly isn't all that exciting, but within the context of this game, there are some pretty cool changes as a consequence of this. Most importantly is that pressing the jump button mid-combo isn't a jump, but instead a character-specific launch attack that brings both you and the clump of ragdolls you're fighting into the air. This launch allows you to turn your hilarious horizontal death ball into a hilarious vertical death ball, with every character being equipped with a set of light and heavy aerial combos to keep the slab of meat in front of you properly tenderized. Your dash button also holds all the same properties in the air as it did on the ground, so you can transport this airborne payload of death in whatever direction you want before satisfyingly ending your combo by smashing it into the ground. You might be noticing a pattern here. The tweaks to the dash button and the introduction of airborne combat that respects that dash button are the most critical changes on offer here for the sole reason that they cause your fists to act as magnets of your opponent's misery, allowing you to easily both create and maintain long, satisfying combos regardless of the character you're playing. Special attacks in previous entries were relegated to a single button, which in essence usually meant you had one screen-clearing Mega Punch of some sort that's equivalent to the Muso attacks from proper Dynasty Warriors games. Pirate Warriors 4 lets you bring 4 swappable special moves into battle at any given time, and these extra slots have caused the developer to broaden their definition of what actually constitutes a special move. The elaborate finishers are still here, but now they share button space with stat increases, heals, guard breaks, projectile attacks, and for some characters, even all-out transformations. A series of character-specific skill trees will allow you to unlock more moves and power up your existing ones, but it never gets too complicated and it ends up with you having a bit more choice in how any given character plays before you bring them out to the battlefield. Okay, this was definitely a change for the One Piece enthusiasts. One Piece's author, Eiichiro Oda, plays fast and loose with the limits of the human body. From the way that faces contort and warp to display extreme emotion, to the downright weird shape that some character bodies just are by default. One Piece's general aesthetic and characters share as much artistic DNA with slapstick cartoons as it does any other anime. This is on display most clearly with extremely large characters that are biologically human but will otherwise be like 10 to 20 feet tall and nobody seems to really notice or care. There are some lightly teased in-universe explanations for this via the means of covert government gigantification experiments, but know that any hypothetical explanation is secondary in importance to the fact that Oda just likes drawing big, intimidating opponents. It's why main character Luffy is consistently smaller than whatever antagonist he's facing, because it lets Oda draw these cool David vs. Goliath panels where our pirate hero is so clearly dwarfed by the threats he's taken on. This idea is exacerbated in the 2 newest storylines from the manga, which feature some of the largest enemies yet, and doing them justice in Pirate Warriors required increasing the boundaries of what Koei Tecmo usually considers the appropriate size of a playable character. These giant characters are playable in the same levels and missions that regular-sized characters are, and it was obvious to me just how much bigger they were when I played returning character Whitebeard, who now has enemies only about as tall as his boot, whereas before they'd make it up to his waist. Pirate Warriors 4 makes these characters playable in the same environments as their less giant counterparts by introducing environmental destruction, which isn't a feature unique to the giants but can most easily be felt by playing them. Any building or object caught in the trajectory of your swing will be crushed and send up a cloud of debris. And it turns out a lot is going to get caught in your trajectory when the object you're swinging is a massive 100-pound club. I wasn't expecting to have parts of Pirate Warriors 4 make me feel like Godzilla, yet here we are. increased horizontal mobility, increased vertical mobility, more options for special attacks, and a way better sense of scale. Those 4 combat changes kept me playing this one for hours, and while I'll probably max out at least 2 to 3 more characters after uploading this video. But remember that Pirate Warriors 4 isn't the excellent One Piece game I've been waiting for. It's got some issues, and the irony is that, as far as issues on the combat front go, a new issue is either created or brought further into the spotlight by each of these great new virtues I highlighted. So let's talk about the vices. I had no issues with the camera in Pirate Warriors 3, and Pirate Warriors 4 lifts that camera system wholesale. The problem with this approach is that Pirate Warriors 3 and 4 are different games. The insane increase to mobility brought about by both the higher prevalence and range of the dash move, plus the ability to use it midair, means that your character will be zipping all across the 3 dimensions on your screen, and the camera very frequently fails to capture that action properly. There are no less than 3 dedicated buttons used to manipulate the camera too. You have full manual control with the right thumbstick, you can press that thumbstick to lock onto an enemy captain, and left bumper allows you to recenter your camera. So the good news is that you have resources, you have the tools to manage this camera system yourself. It's just that it requires more dexterity, speed, and micromanaging than slaying hundreds of pirates does. The jump and its mid-combo launch variant can bring you really high into the air, and if you jump with the out-of-combat movement speed bonus, you'll fling yourself forward long distances. But the level design hasn't really seen any adjustment to account for this increased verticality. Half of the rooftops are gated off by invisible walls, as are even the smallest river you could visually clear with a jump 10 times over, causing you to walk around the very rigid level geometry, despite the fact that the new mobility tools seem to be begging you to do anything but. Adding to the frustration is that half of the time your jumps onto rooftops or higher altitudes will work. Sometimes you can get to a high vantage point and come crashing down with a heavenly descent onto the enemy mob, which makes the frequent times when you get blocked by an invisible wall all the more of a tease. Okay, can anyone tell me if there's a Warriors game out there that reimagines how healing works? This isn't a uniquely Pirate Warriors problem, but the fact that precious healing items are relegated to random drops from chests and enemy officers means that sometimes you'll just be screwed if you get super unlucky and don't get the healing items you need. What brings this to the forefront in Warriors 4 is that a set of special attacks kind of solve this problem. The key differentiator in the Pirate Warriors 4 character roster, what separates your haves from your have-nots, your star-bellied sneeches from your starless, is whether or not the character you want to play has a healing special attack somewhere within their talent tree. If they do, then you're living on easy street. I found that out firsthand when I got stuck on one of the optional hard missions later on in the side campaign. My maxed out Odin could cut down hordes easily, but without any reliable way to self-heal, I was at the mercy of randomness when I found myself in a bind, and what should have been a tense low health challenge ended up having me just backtrack across tons of empty space looking for random healing chests. I tried that same mission at the same difficulty with Katakuri, who I had nowhere near maxed out, an all-around statistically weaker character at the time, and I breezed through the level effortlessly thanks to his ability to eat some donuts to recoup that lost HP. I just think the game would be better if everyone could have snack time. I think the only real downside to the destructible environments is that the destructibility isn't consistently applied. A single building standing in an otherwise leveled environment for no reason saps away a bit of the magic of the system. Even worse is when you try to use destructible buildings to tear a path through a level instead of going the long way, and you end up coming across one of the walls that Tecmo just decided should be immune to all attacks. If none of these critiques sound like deal breakers, it's because they aren't. For all their faults, I still love each and every one of these additions to the combat, and I couldn't imagine a Pirate Warriors without them. They make the gameplay an overall improved package, so I'm glad to report that this 4th entry isn't a case of 1 step forward, 2 steps back, but more so 1 step forward that isn't exactly as large of a stride as one would hope, and its footing is a bit unsure. But it's a step forward nonetheless. I'm not sure how many of the non-combat aspects of this game can be considered a step forward. Look, I don't envy the task of attempting to translate one of the longest running manga series into anything resembling a cohesive, summarized version for video game consumption, but unfavorable comparisons to previous games make some of the choices here hard to defend, regardless of how tough of a job it is. There were over a dozen major storylines that Pirate Warriors 3 covered, including them both in the game's campaign as well as locations to be used in the side levels or free play. Pirate Warriors 4 covers only 6 major storylines, all but the 2 newest being repeats from prior entries. And while I would take quality over quantity any day of the week, I don't know if there is any increased fidelity in the design of the levels or story execution to really make that drop-in count feel worth it. The only part of the story that I would consider good is the few renders of key One Piece story moments that are actually well-directed movie cutscenes. But a bit of that glamour is lost when you realize what a small percentage of the story those actually are, and how many of them are literally copied and pasted from Pirate Warriors 3. In actuality, most of the story is delivered as character models awkwardly and stiffly emoting on screen while the voice actors try their hardest to carry the experience. And that's if you have a character model. Some plot-relevant characters who didn't make the roster cut just get dialogue boxes off to the side while the rest of the characters are talking. It's not great, and granted I don't think it ever was, but Pirate Warriors 4 also had the benefit of a smaller amount of storylines to cover, and also a new console generation that just wasn't put to good use. I got a lot of mileage out of the mercifully included skip button, and I think it's a shame that letting unedited footage of the dialogue system here play out feels like almost a scathing criticism in and of itself.
麦わらの一味が内部崩壊を始めやがったか。こりゃ面白い。
ロビン！死ぬなんて何言ってんだお前！あのなロビン、俺たちもうここまで来ちまったから。
The presentation of the story is weak, and that lack of effort isn't exclusive to the in-between level dialogue, but also seeps into the mid-mission storytelling. Scenes where the levels try to communicate or call back to a moment from the source material, but do so in a way that any fan who recognizes the homage would also recognize the lack of effort put into it. This level here is the Shibondi Archipelago, where your mission is to fight across each of the zones until you've rallied your companions, the members of the Straw Hat Pirates, and can eventually take down the enemy commander. I grinned when I got this submission pop up on my screen to quote, defeat the fake Straw Hat Pirates. That grin didn't make it to my arrival at where the fake Straw Hats were stationed, because that's when I realized that they were just using the generic pirate models like any other group of pirates, with nothing to distinguish them for the purpose they're supposed to be serving. In the manga, these fake Straw Hat Pirates are pretending to be the main characters, and they dress up and do their best to emulate the aesthetic and known qualities of each member. The fact that Koei didn't even include a single one of these fake Straw Hat models for use in the game just blows my mind. Why include the scene at all? Who is this submission for? Did any One Piece fan find enjoyment in this submission's inclusion, and did any non-One Piece fan even understand what was going on? I got a similar feeling when I had to do the arena mission in Dressrosa. The Colosseum is a last man standing, and in the manga it was the first time One Piece ever did anything resembling a battle tournament arc. What made that storyline so fun is just how many unique and interesting characters Oda managed to cram onto every page. I remember when this chapter came out a few years back, and how amazed I was at Oda's ability to introduce dozens of named and interesting looking characters in nearly every panel. It's hard not to have enthusiasm for the amount of energy that just oozes out of the book. In Pirate Warriors 4, you guessed it, every single combatant in the arena is a generic pirate commander model, not a named or unique character among the swarm. And look, this too isn't a deal breaker. I get it. This game series is basically entirely predicated on the idea of sending droves of easy-to-replicate cronies at you without much care put into diversity. but it's just one of the many little things that made me bemoan the lack of effort. And all this is to say that I still think Pirate Warriors 4 is a good game, just not an excellent one that really makes use of the full potential of the brand. I think the series, like many of the other One Piece games, has sort of been missing an X factor. Something that takes it from being a competent, if not great, Warriors template with a One Piece skin, into being a true One Piece game with the tone and the feel of the series beating in its heart. I think a really high effort presentation like some of the Dragon Ball and Naruto games get would be a good start, but that's another video. One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 is a strong Warriors entry that nails the parts that are really important. The core of its combat introduces elements that make fundamental changes to how the game feels, and even if not all of those changes are done entirely elegantly, they still make the fighting all the better for it. Outside of the occasional cool cutscene, the way it presents the One Piece story manages to feel flatter than the two-dimensional comic it's based on, and that stings all the more knowing that Pirate Warriors 4 didn't even cover as many storylines as 3 did. But it's still oh so fun, and despite its flaws, the fact that I still want to keep playing is a testament to how good its new ideas are. If they manage to refine some of those rough edges and give the presentation some extra emphasis, it's not hard to imagine a hypothetical Pirate Warriors 5 being the apex of the Warriors brand. Maybe Pirate Warriors 6.